Hey there everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Cities Skylines. As always, my name is Neil and I have a nice cup of coffee here to get me going for this episode today. So today we're sort of finishing off the main CBD area, or at least one of the major parts, and that is being the sort of lakeside garden slash sort of big park kind of botanical gardens kind of thing. Which is what we'll be working on today. So we're also starting to put in some of our transit options. So you can see here I'm actually getting one of the ferry terminals sorted out, because we're going to start putting ferry terminals around the different parts of the city, because we now have the infrastructure to support that particular transportation mode. Now I've already put in some of the paths in the park. I didn't really show that because there wasn't a lot to it. It was kind of boring, but I've sort of got the paths set out, and I'm trying to sort of do it in a way that if you're at any particular sort of major spot of the park, you can sort of get to any other part of the park or any major sort of landmark of that particular park without needing to cross sort of like a grass area. So there's paths that lead directly to every area that you'd want to go. And the reason why I figured we should do this is because the idea is that this is kind of like half botanical gardens, half park, and so I wanted people to be able to like sit or lie in the grass or have a picnic and not have people walking past them to get to a particular place and not just trying to find a place to sit. I think in terms of maintenance that also helps, because it means that there's less sort of grass that's going to be destroyed, and then sort of animal track kind of carved out from people walking along it. So I figured that'd be a really good sort of thing to try and keep in mind when doing some of the paths for this particular area. So speaking of major areas or major landmarks, this first part that you can see here that we're doing is like a little lookout that sort of looks out over the lake towards the mountains, and so I'm trying to make sure that when I'm doing this, there's no interrupted view that they can sort of see out. So basically when I'm putting on the trees in later, you'll notice that I'll put some trees in front of it and then come back and realize that that's actually going to be in the way of the sight line. So I make sure to put smaller trees so they can sort of see out without hassle. So again, we're sort of making heavy use of these network walls and then sort of plough asphalts to kind of make our own custom asset within the game, and not necessarily with the asset creator as well. Again, using that sort of technique of putting sort of larger trees and bushes to make it look like there's like an elevated garden bed, which works out really well too if you sort of clip it in the right way. You can make that look quite nice, very similar to what I did with the stadium. And then here we're sort of starting to put in the textures of the sort of floor that we're going to have, or of that. Putting them up along here as well. And then we'll sort of, once we've done that, we'll put in some surrounding paths and work on the trees and things like that to make this place look quite nice. So here we're just putting in this nice big staircase, which is going to be quite a large sort of wide staircase that you can sort of accommodate plenty of traffic flow of people sort of coming and going as well, and then sort of gradually thins out as you get towards the lookout. And then here we're putting in what I would sort of imagine to be like some amenities. So if you need to go to the bathroom and things like that, you sort of got a place to do it. And because this is one of the few structures, I figured I'd put it here rather than sort of making a separate building for like amenities and stuff like that. It kind of makes sense. Like I've seen it before, like you'll have like a lookout and then you'll have sort of amenities underneath to sort of save on space and sort of minimize the amount of structures that are present within like botanical gardens or sort of a park or main park. So I thought that was a pretty good idea, and I try and do that a bit throughout. So you'll see in like another building that has a similar kind of principle behind it as well. And now you can see here I'm plopping down the trees, and they're actually blocking that sort of lookout area, so I will come back and actually delete them now and just put some smaller trees in. I thought it'd be cool to have a nice sort of covered walkway, like almost kind of like reminiscent of like a rainforest kind of walkway, Obviously this isn't a rainforest, it's more woodsy, but I think sort of having that nice enclosed feeling, like I've been to a couple of different botanical gardens, and I kind of quite like that whole closed-in feeling where you feel quite separated from the outside world, and you don't feel like as if you're in a city as well, which is what I've tried to do, and I've done that in the previous park in the city as well, just to sort of give a few of these spots that people can get to to sort of feel like they're away from the city, but not having to drive, a couple of hours to achieve that as well. So that's kind of one of the things I'm going for as well. The other thing is that I'm trying to have an even distribution between like open spaces for people to sit, as well as nice gardens. So I sort of leave a lot of open areas intentionally, just so that people can, sit down and relax. So I might even see if I can find some sort of maybe like some blanket assets or something to just create like a sort of like a picnic kind of area to make it look like people are actually using that spot. Because at the moment it is just grass. So I'll try and sort of sort something out for like the ending cinematics and the final product. And then here we're sort of starting the first part of our sort of garden areas. This kind of technique I really liked, and it kind of worked out quite well, just having these low walls, putting down the dirt textures, and then putting a whole bunch of different plants. I use a variety of different plants, but I keep it fairly uniform throughout, so you always see the same plants, but there's still a variety, just to make everything look kind of constant. I don't want it to be sort of like one of those botanical gardens where you have all these different sort of plants from all over the world, because it's not quite a botanical garden, it is also like a park as well. So I sort of tried to stick with that theme too. And then here we're sort of doing like a little amphitheater. So some of the parks I've been to, and mainly there's one in Brisbane that I've been to, has an actual like massive sort of stage and an amphitheater. And because you've got these really open fields, it's perfect to host these sort of like concerts and stuff, because you've got these open fields and it's probably not too much hassle to organise it. You just have to kind of set up some fences to sort it out. So I figured it'd be nice to have a cool amphitheatre, have it like along the waterfront as well, just to have like a nice backdrop. And then you've also got the mountains in the background, similar to the lookout we made before. So again, most of these buildings that I put into the park are actually all just sort of using assets and walls to make them myself. Like I kind of had to look for a stage on the workshop, and I couldn't really find one that I liked and had the right scale. So I thought, well, considering what I did the last episode, which was very architecturally based and a lot of customizing, buildings and stuff, I figured I'd sort of take the same route with this one and just try and find props that I can sort of use to create my own asset and make it look quite believable. And I think with the walls and the ploppable asphalt and then putting textures on top of those, it seems really easy to do, and it's a lot of fun to be able to sort of go that extra mile. I guess it kind of adds a bit more work overall, but I think it's definitely quite rewarding in the long run. The good thing about this is, because usually stages, they usually have like a black flooring, and so the good thing with that is when I put the ploppable decals on, they're already black, so I don't really have to worry about texturing it, and because it's already black, so it's fine. So that took out a lot of effort and saved a bit of time as well. And then here we're just sort of putting in some final touches, not really too much to the stage. I mean, it is just a stage, but I just quickly put some stage lights on there, which actually look really nice at night. Kind of makes the stage look like quite alive. I should try and get some crowd assets, because that'd look pretty cool to sort of make it look like there's a concert going. I think you can even get, I can't remember if you can get like moving lights or moving textures, but that'd be cool to sort of explore and see if that's possible. But I'm not sure about that one. I thought I saw some, maybe Ronix do something like that. Again, coming up to more detailing with the gardens. I don't really show too much of this. I think it's about 3 different areas that I do, because it is fairly repetitive, but I tried to find the 3 of the most different sort of areas I've done, and like using different shapes and stuff. But this particular garden is sort of situated in the center of the park, so all the sort of paths kind of converge on this one central point. And I think there's with a sort of cafe to the right of it. So this is kind of the main area that you can get to, and so we obviously put like quite a lot of effort into the gardens here and make it look quite nice and very sort of lush and things like that. So also adding in some rocks as well. I kind of like having the rocks to break it up a little bit, just so it's not just like all greenery, because then it just kind of looks like a green blur. So having these rocks and these different coloured plants is a good way to sort of add a bit more colour and contrast to it and kind of break it up, and sort of makes the whole thing look quite nice, as well as trying to replicate that sort of circle theme or circle shape throughout by having some of the plants curve in a line as well. This next part, I actually probably really enjoy this part, which is kind of making like a man-made little lake. So what I do is I sort of carve it out with the terrain tool, and then I get sort of some more walls and more ploppable asphalts to kind of make more of a harder edge, so that you sort of got like a kind of like a balcony where you can come right up to the waterfront and have a look over there. Again, with the limitations of the terrain, you can't do that normally, so I sort of went this way just to sort of make it look a bit more believable as well, so it's not just this kind of random ditch in the ground, and it sort of makes it look a bit neater and a bit more sort of manicured and like it's supposed to be there. So I was really sort of happy with how that turned out. At this point here, I was kind of worried how this is going to work, because I've got like all these paths clipping, and the ploppable asphalt wasn't at the right height, and the terrain tool was kind of limited a little bit because of the paths. So at one point I was a little worried that it might not turn out, but I just sort of stuck with it, and after a bit of tweaking it eventually sort of came to fruition and sort of worked out quite well, which is good, because I was really hoping that this would work out to sort of be a nice prominent feature in this park. And then we just kind of use the terrain, terrain themed decals just to kind of smooth it all out and blend it all in. And at this point, you can't even tell that unless you look really closely, it's kind of hard to tell that there are actual sort of asphalt ploppables there as well, which is really good. That's kind of like what I was going for as well. And then obviously to finish off that sort of balcony area, and sort of adding in some safety railings, and so you can sort of you're not gonna, small kids aren't gonna fall in or anything like that. And then it's going to be a matter of adding some planters and some bushes and stuff like that, because I still wanted to have some natural things around there, and I thought adding those rocks would be quite nice. And then putting in like a selection of bushes and things like that to just sort of make it look a little less barren and a bit more sort of what you would expect to see with a lake, I guess. So it's kind of like half man-made but kind of half natural is sort of what I was trying to go for. And then after that, I'll sort of come back and use more of those dirt decals to kind of blend back that natural area sort of into the forest and make it look not as jarring. So you sort of got this nice contrast between like man-made and kind of natural as well. So that worked out quite well. So you can see that's what I'm doing there. I'm using like fallen leaf textures and dirt textures to kind of merge it all in and blend it together and make it look quite nice, and sort of it all blends in quite well. I'm saying blend a lot. The other thing as well is like what I tried to do is with the garden beds and some of the structures, I tried to kind of make everything line up. So perhaps like one thing on one side of the park would line up with the edge of something else on the other side. So I tried to do that throughout. I sort of got the idea, I guess, from sort of architecture, because that is quite a main thing in architecture. But another idea is that there was this park in, I think it's France, and I can't remember what it's called, but it's basically like, it pays homage to deconstructionism, which is basically the deliberate, like you deliberately break architectural conventions and stuff. But I noticed in that park there were still a lot of things that would line up, or that would sort of cut through several elements that would kind of make it look like they were lined up. So I sort of tried to take forward that idea a little bit in this part, not completely, because I didn't want it to go like full deconstructionism, but I tried to sort of carry in a lot of that lining up and sort of cutting through garden beds sort of what's happening here with the central circle, how sort of the paths cut through everything, but a little bit more extreme in certain other areas. I can't remember what the park was called, but if anyone knows, that'd be cool. It's on the tip of my tongue. I just can't remember it. But it's a park in over in France somewhere, maybe Paris. I'm not sure. And it's actually really cool. Looks like a fun park to play on actually as well. But coming back to here, we're sort of putting in, finishing off the last sort of central garden areas of this area. Putting in some rocks to kind of break it up a little bit. I kind of like the idea of leaving some, like, not completely covering it with foliage, so I sort of leave some sort of dirt patches there, I think, to add a bit more breathing room, so it kind of looks like you've got this thick central area and it kind of slowly spreads out as you go. But also because, like, if people are doing maintenance or stuff, they're going to be walking through there, so there's going to be like evidence that someone's been through there and maybe knocked a few plants to the side or something like that. So I didn't want it to be completely sort of full with plants and things like that. And I think it makes it look a bit more realistic as well. Having sort of some control elements, like very structured elements like curves and lines, but also having a few more random sort of allotments of plants and bushes and those sort of things. So here we're sort of moving away from like park stuff and just we're still in the park, but this is more like the sort of, I guess, maintenance area, so where like all the tools would be to maintain the grounds, so maybe lawnmowers, maybe just stuff to fix things, I guess, watering facilities, all that sort of thing. And this kind of is moved away from the main area and it's kind of surrounded by trees, and it's also near the main car park, so all the sort of urban things I sort of put to one area so that you can it's out of the way and it's not going to be interrupting your experience when you're at the park as well. So rather than having, like, you know, the entrance or like sort of the visitor centre in one area and then the maintenance area in another area and then the car park somewhere else, where you kind of, if you were in any point in the park, you might be able to see one of these three things, whereas having them all together on one side, you can sort of get away from it. And you're less likely to see them from where you are, which is, I think, an important thing. And I think a lot of botanical gardens try to do that. Again, it's trying to give you that sense that you're not really as close to civilization as you actually are. So I think I sort of achieved that quite well with having all these areas in the one spot. But this area is still pretty fun to do, actually. Like, it's nice to have that bit of natural design and then sort of a bit more industrial / structure-based design. And that actually brings me to another point, is that later on in the time lapse there's actually another custom building that I made, but I actually really enjoyed doing this one. I sort of really tried to experiment a bit, and I mentioned it before, which is the one that has like another sort of outlook on top of it. So we'll get to that one. That'll be towards the very end of the episode. So look forward to that, because I actually really enjoyed playing around with it, and it's going to be fun to sort of explain what I'm doing with that one. So here it's just a matter of putting in these final touches. I've almost finished this maintenance area. I'm just putting in like some more sheds and barrels, and then some sort of maintenance vehicles and things like that. And then just to the side of that, there's the main car park, which I've got here, and I'm just sort of putting in a bit of detail. Around this area I've got a lot of the dirt texture, and I sort of tried to make this a more, not barren, but very spaced out area. So there's a few trees and a couple of rocks, and it's essentially a very open area, just trying to add some contrast to the rest of the park. So in one area you've got a lot of tightly concentrated bushes and trees, and then in other areas it's a bit more spread out, just to add a little bit of variety to it, but not too much as well. Because it would be kind of boring just to sort of do the same thing over and over again and have the same plants and trees and same sort of design style behind it. And then this is one of the last, maybe second last gardens that we do, and basically it backs off this cafe area just to the left of it, and I change up the structure. So I had this sort of corner area to sort of fill in that area and sort of finish off that kind of like that curve that the little restaurant has. And then I sort of go into a more sort of striped approach. So having these sort of lines, these more structured lines. And basically where the line ends on the left, that actually, this comes back to matching up different elements in line with each other. You'll see later on that line is going to carry up towards another garden bed further down, and the sides or the edges are going to line up fairly closely. Like I sort of use the network mod to sort of measure out a line and then delete it and make the new line as well. And what I think I might even do actually towards the end of the time lapse, actually get like an overview of the garden, and then I'll sort of plot out where these lines are. I mean, you'll probably be able to pick them out pretty quickly, but I think it'd be cool to see, here's one line, here's another line, and here's how they match up as well. So that's one thing that I'll probably do towards the end of the time lapse. You'll sort of see the workings of this line here. You can see I start to put these trees along the edge, and I sort of continue it across, and then I start another garden bed. Not quite in line, but in the same orientation, in preparation for the next part later on. And then here, this is the sort of central main walkway that goes right down the middle of the park towards the big circle in the middle, and it goes all the way down to the ferry terminal, which sort of acts as like a second entrance that people can get to via like ferry. So this is, because this is kind of like a very straight and narrow, and it's the main entrance, I decided to go with a very structured approach. So everything's in line, everything's quite neat, it's not so random as well. I think that works out quite well. Again, just adding a bit more contrast, but I'm still using the same plants and the same bushes that I would normally. And you can see me plotting a few signs. I put a few at all the different entrances, so like it's a little information sign or like a map of the park, and you can sort of see where all the main areas are as well, just to help your navigation and stuff like that. And then adding a few more paths. I sort of had this path that kind of rings around the center, so I continued that on with those middle areas that you can see with the stone path and things like that. And then adding here some bollard lights, and then I'm sort of putting these like little flags on the on top of them, as if maybe it might be an event or a seasonal thing or some sort of theme that the gardens might be having as well. And then this area here, you can just see I'm putting in some trees. This is kind of going to be one of the main areas that you would sit down and have a picnic. I did put a few trees around because I didn't want it to be completely sparse, but also, when you're in the garden, sometimes you do want to look for shade because you might not have an umbrella or something like that. So I figured I'd put a few options that people can sit under a nice tree, but not so much that it kind of felt like an actual forest or cluster of trees or stuff like that. And then this one is the last garden that I do for this episode, and it's just adding. So I basically added another circle because I kind of like the idea of having a few. Like you've got the main circle, and then you've got this sort of offset circle, but it's also aligned in the same arc that goes through the main circle. So I figured just to add a bit more continuity, I figured I'd add something like that because I think it looks quite nice. I'll save myself a bit of time just to copy and paste some of the plants because I've already done a whole bunch, so I may as well just sort of reuse that one there rather than placing down them individually, but still putting a few final plants individually just to add a bit more customization. Now here was I'm putting down, you can see those sort of decals, because what I'm using is, you probably notice, these really small paths, which are absolutely amazing. Because I find the default paths sometimes a little, like they're good for what they are, but in more tighter spaces they're a little too big, and there's no real sort of, you can sort of use the terrain painter to get rid of them, but these are a lot nicer because they're a lot thinner and they just work so much better overall. But the problem is when they connect up with each other, sometimes they kind of glitch out and sort of create these black squares. So I'm sort of, and you can't really paint over them with textures. You just sort of have to use, in fact, you can't even use decals. You have to use the ploppable asphalt, and then you have to put the decals on it. So you'll notice there's a few of those around to try and cover that up, but then I figured, well, I may as well make these more deliberate, because it would kind of be weird to have some in some places or in some sort of junctions and intersections, but none in others. So I sort of try and put it in places that there aren't sort of glitching terrain, just to kind of make it a bit more consistent and sort of cover up the fact that it's actually trying to hide up like essentially a hole in the terrain. Now this garden bed here is one of the garden beds I was talking about before that actually matches up with the line design that we did further up. You probably would have seen that when I was talking about it before, but you could sort of see me using the network for the walls to measure out how it's going to match up, and then I sort of delete it and start where it finishes off and then sort of line it up. And then it sort of also lines up with the center of that circle a little bit, from, where that path cuts through the middle as well. And then just sort of adding in some sort of different shapes, just to sort of make it a bit different from the sort of the curved triangles that I had before, so it's not always the same thing. So here we're coming reasonably close to the last bit. This is kind of like the final sort of areas of sort of gardens and stuff that we're doing. This is more of the open area I was talking about next to the car parks, where it's a bit more not barren, but very open and sort of simplistic as well. This is kind of the place I imagine you might sort of maybe let your kids play on, like this sort of, it's open so you can see everything and see people quite easily. You got a few small rocks that kids might want to jump on and stuff like that. So it's kind of like half sort of like a display of, I guess, the garden and rock sculptures, but also kind of like half a playground for kids as well, a more natural playground. So this part here is probably my favorite part of this entire build. For some reason I really like messing around with making these kind of the terrain come out to a straight drop using ploppable asphalt and the decals, and I think in terms of landscaping it adds a much deeper, not deeper, but it just adds a really nice level of I guess contrast. It's something a little bit different than having these gentle mountains and not using the keys to sort of create that drop. So I really make a lot of use of these. This looks really cool. So you sort of got these sort of tiered level grass areas that people could sit on and sort of overlook the bay, the lake area and things like that. So like kind of like another picnic area, but then you've also got seats down below that people can sort of sit on and relax and things like that. And then I did something a little bit different. I thought I wanted to add a bit more sort of, I guess, more monument kind of thing. So I sort of raised up this section of wall just as like a little sort of statue or monument or something like that, to add a bit more variety than just having a blank wall. Just something I wanted to play around with. I've seen similar things in other places where there's just these seemingly massive slabs of concrete that just go straight up. Not really for any particular reason. I think it's more just for like aesthetics and just to sort of add a bit more interest. But they usually are in these sort of open space areas where you can see them from quite a distance away. And I suppose maybe as a landmark it could be quite good, because someone could say, oh, well, I mean, like, oh, I'll meet you at the big sort of pillar walls or something like that. I don't know how you would, big slab walls or something like that. Possibly, I'm not entirely sure. But I thought I'd add that in to that area. And then again, just adding these final little more sparse garden bed areas and sort of some more these they're like wooden, they're wooden like platforms that people can sit on. You've probably seen them a lot at different parks. It's very, very common, at least in Australia anyway. So it's these different shaped wooden platforms that kind of have some tiered levels, so you can sort of, a lot of different people can sit there quite comfortably, and probably used to wait for people to meet up as well. So I thought I'd add a few of them in. That's a nice little entrance from the ferry area. And then this area is the last garden bed. Just adding some more circular designs, just to sort of break up the spice area. I'm still not going too crazy on the bushes, like I keep it fairly small, fairly simple as well. And then I add some lights in that area because I think that'll look kind of cool in that area. And I add some more lights all around the just kind of sparse out area or spaced out area, just because I think it'll look quite nice having these sort of different lights in contrast with some of the trees, and then like sort of light rebounding off the rocks and things like that. And then the last bit, so this is literally my favorite part. I talked about it before, is this final structure, which to me is kind of like the sort of visitor center. So I'm basically making like kind of like a custom asset in game instead of the editor. I don't know if I could do this in the editor with the walls. I imagine I might be able to, but I notice sometimes you don't always have access to everything that you can get in the game through mods, so I'm not entirely sure. But regardless, this was a lot of fun to do. Really sort of went a little all out with this one, using these nice sort of new pergolas that I got, which I think are part of that same pack that I had before with the wooden platforms that I was plopping down at the entrance prior. But basically, this is basically my idea of a visitor center, and then I'm basically having like a lookout area on the top, so you can look out over the lake again. On top of that, very similar to what I did with the first lookout area with the amenities underneath, but this one's got more function because it's an actual visitor center. It's got like a proper entrance and stuff like that, and then just kind of adding in these walls. I'm gonna use different decals to make the roof and make the platform and make the walkway that goes up there, and using these sort of like, I don't know what they are, they're like industrial kind of like industrial covered conveyor belts, which I basically use as like a protruding section of this building that comes out from the roof. You can sort of see a section that I haven't quite filled in. I couldn't really find, I kind of wanted to spare my props a little bit, so I didn't want to use ploppable asphalt, so I used those industrial conveyor belt things to sort of fill in that space and just adds a bit more interesting form to that building than just sort of having a straight flat roof. Kind of also acts well as a nice back wall for the lookout area that I put up there, and so I figured all in all that was a good idea to have that as well. And then making this outdoor area, trying to match it up with the shapes that are around it. So you can see there's sort of like that corner to the right sort of kind of comes through the path, but I actually go back off camera and just sort of make it line up more with that path, just to kind of fit it in with the shapes. And that's kind of what I like doing, is sort of picking a spot, putting some stuff down, and then sort of making things work with the area and shapes that I have. I think it's quite fun, and that's where you get the most interesting builds come from, as opposed to just having like a nice easy sort of square area to work with. It just allows you to sort of experiment a bit more and play around with these different shapes. And then here I'm just putting in the top area of this building, so raising the walls, trying to make that sort of like a balcony thing, adding some plants and grass beds and stuff like that, just to make this like a nice sort of lookout area. And once I put like that, I put this little pergola in, once I put in like some umbrellas down, that's kind of when this area really comes to life and just looks really good. Like right now it looks okay, but I don't know, for some reason the umbrellas did it for me. Maybe because it sort of added this whole idea that there would be people using this area or something like that. But yeah, it was really cool to do. So I'm just about to put them in now, and you can see I'm just plopping in those umbrellas there. And that's pretty much it for this episode. As always, I'll show you some cinematics and an overview of the map, so you can see all the lines there matching up to like the different garden beds as well, just to get an idea of what I was talking about before. But apart from that, that's everything for this episode. My name is Nuala. Thanks for watching, and until next time, see ya.